Action.
Action. All right. The placement of the shoulder pads. But if they crumpled up, you want to kind of give them a quick little pressing to make sure that they have a nice shape. So we get the little wrinkles out.
Wrinkle-free diapers.
Now the shoulder pad goes in after you finish your neckline. You have to slip the neckline first, which I haven't done, and then you place your shoulder pads. And you have to kind of line it up, like this is the back, this is the front. And when you look at this shoulder pad, you notice that there is a notch here, and that one side is long and one side is short. Because when you fold it right here where the notch is, you find that this one is longer. The longer side belongs in the front because you have a kind of like a dip in here and you're trying to fill it out so when the jacket hangs on your body it's nice and flat and doesn't sink in. So these are the tailored shoulder pads and you should always use this kind for jackets or coats. So it sits like that. So in order to do this, we'll fold it in half. Not in half, we'll fold it at the notch. And then you determine, let's see, this one, what side you're on. It's my back. And this is my, oh, I did have the right one, sorry. So, this folds, and then you also, you don't line it up with your seam line. Do not line up, you line up with the cutting line of the seam because the shoulder pad has to extend a little bit over the seam so that the sleeve can roll real nice. And you don't get that